Hey everybody, how's everybody doing this morning? Welcome to my Tuesday live streams where we talk about photography and I answer any questions you might have about our Olympus cameras or photography in general. And also to kind of catch up on what I've been doing for the past week and what I'm looking ahead to do. Fortunately, things are picking up a little bit again. And also see how you guys are doing. I hope everyone's doing well. Thanks for letting me into your homes today or wherever you may be. Um, I really appreciate our time together. I don't take it for granted, and hopefully I don't waste anyone's time. I want to make the live streams as entertaining or as educational or productive as possible. So with that said, let me see who's here. Hopefully, if there's any problems with the audio or video, let me know. It's kind of a today tried to start like I sat down here an hour ago to try to set everything up and get it all ready. And I can already see the camera's shifted. let me move the camera a little bit. So and then I'll try and tell you what happened. I don't know, that's good enough. I can always move it again. Oh my God, it's still not right. Well, just one more move. All right, good enough. Hold on. It's always something. So my mom calls like at 9:20 and is having problems because she has a Zoom meeting at 10 o'clock. So I have to go over to her house, set everything up, and then come back here. And I had like 5 minutes to like comb my hair and turn everything on. So I didn't really get the full hour I wanted to try to prep so everything would go nice and smooth today. But and Ellie, is driving her nuts right now is the acorns are starting to fall. I got this humongous like acorn tree in the backyard. And it just makes all these noises, right? That just drives her nuts. And then she goes out and she eats acorns. Apparently acorns aren't terrible for dogs, but she's a chow hound. Oh, okay. So let's see who's here. Michael's here, Plato, Christine, John Yutze, and Druid, good to see you. Ruth, Lassay, and John Allen. All right. Let's see. This is I can't read the name, but it says I bought an Ollie E500 with a 12-60. Get good IQ with Olympus Workspace. Color is okay, but few minutes in Lightroom and the same color from SEMA CCD. Unfortunately, editing in Lightroom in any case. So I'm not sure what your question is. But yeah, the E500, I believe, had the Kodak sensor in it, which gives kind of its own unique sort of flavor to the colors. Very subtle. And because I have an E500, I haven't used it recently, but I compared it directly against like the EM1 Mark II or the Mark III. And even after you do the white balance, right, there's still a very subtle warmth to the E500 images. It's very, very subtle though. And, unless you put two images side by side, you wouldn't be able to tell. I think the color reproduction is still pretty accurate on both cameras. And that's one of the things I really like about Olympus are, the color science, if you want to call it that, has always been very pleasing to me. And I've never had really any complaints dealing with the colors that I'm getting out of the camera, straight out of camera, whether I'm working with the raw image or obviously the JPEGs. With the JPEGs, a lot of times I'm using one of the art filters or monochrome profiles in the Pen. And I try and post on my Instagram and Flickr, different kinds of images and shots that I do with these cameras, mainly to kind of showcase, you know, the camera and the quality of the camera, not so much my photography skill set or ability to be creative, because my shots are very generic. Like I did some shots of an airport this week, which was simply I just went to pick up my mom from the airport, so I brought my camera and got a few shots for the few minutes I had before she was ready, waiting for me at the baggage claim. Um, okay, yeah, no, no, okay. So you saw my video, and there's no magic in the CCD. Yeah, it's not much. There's not a huge difference. Once you balance the white balance, I think that the white balance is slightly different. The default or white balance science or algorithms in the cameras are different. Obviously, after all this time, they've gotten better. Uh, and once you correct for that, the colors are pretty much the same. And so ideally, just use the auto white balance and don't do white balance correction. You'll get sort of a more authentic E500 experience. um, but yeah, I see what you mean now. I would agree with you. It's very, very subtle, the difference, if any. I know I had I don't know if you saw this, but I do have on my Flickr page. Where is it? Hold on. Let me address this real quick. In my albums, I have one album called Comparisons where I do, let me see, comparisons between cameras or software. Here it is. There's not much in here. But yeah, here's an E500, right? And let's see, these are the straight out of camera JPEG. So here's the E500 on top. And then the EM1 Mark III on the bottom. And, other than a little bit more detail because of the higher resolution on the EM1 Mark III, the M1 Mark III actually looks a little warmer here than the E500. But let's see, I have another one here. These are also straight out of camera in the sun. So in the shade, the EM1 Mark III did a better job at adjusting the white balance to make it a little bit warmer, whereas the E500 in the shade, the white balance algorithm kept the colors a little bit cooler. But then when you go into full sun, like in this image, you can see the E500 is definitely warmer, but then the EM1 Mark III cooled it off a little bit. And then I don't think I did a, let me see this one. Yeah, this is the one where I matched the white balances together. So the E500 on top, the EM1 Mark III. So when I actually white balanced it, you can see that the E500, particularly if you look at the grass, is a little bit warmer than the EM1 Mark III. Um, so that's the comparison I did and what I found. Like especially over here on the bark on this tree, you can see there's definitely a lot more warmth. And I white balanced on her forehead here, uh, so that it would be the same, right? So there it is with the white balance. Let me see what this image is. This image is, okay, so that was the shade. In the sun, when I white balance the things in the sun, it's almost identical, but the M1 Mark III is just a tiny bit warmer maybe, but it's pretty much the same. So these are white balanced, and the E500 on the top again. This is white balanced in the shade where the E500 was warmer. And then this is the straight out of camera. So you can see that definitely it's the white balance color science in the cameras that are very different. And I think the M1 Mark III obviously is a much more mature auto white balance color science. But straight out of camera in the sun, you get a much warmer experience and then a much cooler experience in the shade. But that's all. And then once they're evenly matched, it's really close. It's very, very subtle. Let's see. So hopefully that addresses, or that confirms what you found, that there's not a huge difference once you correct for white balance. It's very subtle. And then, Rob, I saw a video about the TT Artisan's 40mm f2.8 macro. Apparently it's quite good for the price, manual focus. Yeah, it sounds good. I haven't seen any videos on this lens. I think Jimmy might have one. I forget. One of our friends published a video on it, but I haven't watched it. I do have a lens coming in though from 7 Artisans. I think it's the 7.5mm fisheye lens. I think it's an f2.8. Hold on. Ellie, come here. Lay down. She's on high alert, man, with these acorns falling, making sounds like somebody's outside. So I do have that lens coming in any day now, and I'll do a review on that. Do a couple of photo walks, and I can compare it directly against the 8mm fisheye Pro from Olympus. So that'll be kind of fun. And that'll tell us how good this lens really is, because I know the 8mm fisheye Pro is awesome. Really has awesome optics, and it's very, very sharp lens. So it'll be interesting to compare. The problem with fisheye lenses, like the 8mm or the 7.5 coming in, is when the lens is so wide, it's very it just looks sharp because of the wide angle. But now that I can do a side-by-side comparison, I think we'll know whether or not it's, relative to each other, which one is sharper. And Lisa, hi, says, hi, Rob. I'm looking for a tutorial on the M1 Mark III. Do you know if there's much difference between the EM1 Mark II? It's not much difference. Pretty much the same thing. There's extra features on the M1 Mark III that the M1 Mark II does not have, like the live ND and handheld high-res shot mode. But other than that, I can't think of much difference between the two cameras, just off the top of my head. There's an extra custom mode on the mode dial, so there's 4 C1, C2, C3, C4 instead of C1, C2, C3. And the other significant difference is in the image stabilization. It has much better image stabilization. and it has much better face detect autofocus. I mean, by far. It's not like just a little better, it's a lot better. So it's really in the feature set, additional features that the M1 Mark III has more so than any differences in operating the camera. So you can probably figure out how to use the extra features. I mean, image stabilization, there's nothing to learn there. It's just already built in. And there's also Starry Sky AF, which works pretty well. But yeah, tutorial wise, you can watch anything. You can watch my tutorial. I have one for the EM5 Mark III, which is pretty similar. There's some small autofocus differences with the EM1 Mark III, where you can program your own kind of grids, I think, in the M1 Mark III. But these are very fringe type benefits, right, for most photographers. These are not core functionalities of operating a camera, which is going to be similar across almost every Olympus OMD in terms of the menu. Just the layout might be a little bit different. So, you know, you can watch any tutorial by any of us here online, you know, Robin or Peter or Jimmy, you know, the tips and tricks videos that they put out, and then the full on, you know, detailed tutorials that I put out for any of the OMDs, and it should apply to the M1 Mark III quite readily. Even if the menu item might be in a little bit different place, it should come up in the general same area. And Marco says, hey Marco, how you doing? Says the E500 seems green subtone. I see it in the skin tone. Use Lightroom to degrease green, and yeah. Or, you know, the other way is to just use a full on, you know, color calibration tool, right? And you can calibrate the camera with the software and your monitor and everything if you want to go full on. But yeah, it does seem a little green. I'm looking at it now. There is a slight tint of green that you could pull out, maybe a little bit of blue. Yep. And says, do you allow DxO Photolab to automatically import lens profile? And if so, have you found that occasionally introduce chromatic aberration, purple fringing that's not in the raw files? You know, I haven't I haven't looked at it. I do automatically download every time it pops up the lens profiles, but I hadn't noticed it adding any purple fringing. I'll have to do a comparison. I don't have well, I have a few pictures with purple fringing, but I have to do a comparison. I haven't looked at it that closely because it's so minimal, the purple fringing. Anyway, but I hadn't noticed to be honest. What you can do, Marco, is just email me, email one of your images that has the purple fringing after you apply the DxO optical corrections. You know, if you email me that raw image, I can look at it. That would probably be the best way because I might have a hard time finding one where that's the case. And Christine says the 7 Artisans 7.528 is good. Good. Yeah, I expect it'll be pretty decent. I mean, especially for the price at, I don't know, I think it's selling for 130, 140 bucks. I mean, my expectations won't be that high to begin with because of the price point, but if it's almost as good as an the Pro lens from Olympus, but you have to manually focus. But with fisheye lenses, that's not a big deal. Says your fisheye comparison. How if you threw in the Wallymax 7.5 into the mix as well? I don't have that lens, so I wouldn't be able to compare it. Yeah, I have not formed any opinion yet until the lens comes in, and I don't have the Samyang version. Okay, Marco, thanks. Yeah, just email that to me. I can look at it. Uh, Andrew, how are you, Andrew? Any thoughts on mixing Olympus and Panasonic lenses on Olympus bodies? Yeah, uh, there's some none of these should be deal breakers, really. But if you're using an Olympus body and you put a Panasonic lens on, you might lose some of the functionality or special features that the camera has. So, for example, I know there's focus bracketing, which you will keep, but some OMDs have focus stacking built in, and you lose that. Also, the Pro Capture, there's a Pro Capture High and a Pro Capture Low. I believe you still keep Pro Capture High, but you lose Pro Capture Low. You don't get you lose one of the two. I'm pretty sure it's the Pro Capture Low when you put a Panasonic lens on. And those are two off the top of my head. And that said, um, I can't think of any other features that you might lose. Now, another thing is I noticed that the autofocusing is a little bit slower when I use a Panasonic lens on an Olympus body. I can't really measure it for photography. It's pretty quick either way. I mean, if you're a sports action guy, you might see a difference, but I could not, in the little bit of testing I did, I could not see much difference photographically. But in video, when you're using the contrast detect autofocus cameras, like the EM1s Mark II and 3 have phase detect, the EM5 Mark III has phase detect. But the EM5 Mark II, the EM10 Mark II, all of the EM10s all have contrast detect. I don't think this applies to you because you said you're buying an EM1 Mark III. But for the sake of everyone else, in those instances, the video autofocus is really slow. When I use a Panasonic lens, specifically the Panasonic 25 f1.8 prime, is particularly slow on cameras that use contrast detect only. The video autofocus with the phase detect cameras like the EM1 Mark III, the EM1 Mark II and 3, no problems at all. In fact, I'm using the Panasonic 25 millimeter f1.7 right now for my live stream here. And the autofocus is fine because it's on my EM1 Mark II. See, if I put my hand up, it focuses up on my hand pretty quickly, then back to my face pretty quickly, right? And I don't know if I walk or move towards the lens, it's probably too hard to tell in a live stream if it's keeping up. That'd be a more realistic test. I mean, people don't do this in real life, right? But uh, on the EM10 Mark II and all the contrast detect only cameras, it's a big deal. If I do this and then come back, it takes a long time, if ever, to come back and focus on me. So that's the only problems that I've seen. Other than that, I think they're fine. I mean, you lose the advantages of the optical image stabilization built into a lot of the Panasonic lenses. I don't think you can do any kind of dual sync type image stabilization where like the M1 Mark III, if you put an Olympus lens on that has image stabilization built in, you can combine the two with the camera. I don't know if it's done automatically or if you have to set it in a menu, but you can combine the two in the camera and get even better image stabilization, particularly with the telephoto lenses. With the Panasonics, you cannot combine the image stabilization between the two. So if you've been thinking about, say, the 100 to 400 or any of the telephotos from Panasonic that have image stabilization built in, you're going to lose that advantage over, say, an Olympus lens that has image stabilization. So those are the things off the top of my head. So I always tend to buy Olympus lenses because I don't want to lose any functionality from the camera if possible. And I don't see much difference in the optics. I mean, both companies make great lenses. But I just prefer the Olympuses. And System Nature is here. I think I answered your question. I don't know if on Instagram, my airport pictures. I was just picking up my mom. Any news about red squirrels? I don't think I've ever seen a red squirrel around here. I've seen black and gray, but not red. Okay. I do want to talk about something I did this week. Let me grab my coffee and then we'll get into what I've been up to. Hold on. Plus, I had to let Ellie out. She you guys couldn't see it, but she kept scratching my leg. She wanted to go out. No, I'm not traveling, Plato. I'd like to travel, somewhere around in the country. I don't like to travel overseas or out of the country, but I was checking my hotel points and everything on my credit card, so I got a couple of free nights that I can use. So I'm going to do that. I just don't know where to go, for a couple of days. Because it's not just the hotel costs, even though that's a good chunk of it. It's all the places I go visit and food and all of that and gas. Because I pretty much drive everywhere I go. Because I want to take Ellie with me. Come here to Canada. Oh, okay. Canada might be all right, but I think I still need a passport to get into Canada, don't I? I don't have a passport. And how many consumer grade Olympus lenses have image stabilization? I know the pros, usually only the telephoto lenses from Olympus. Like the 12 to 100 is probably the shortest telephoto, then the 40 to 150 and the 300. Those are the ones I think that have image stabilization, but the shorter lenses and the cheaper ones don't have it and don't really need it for the most part. So if you want image stabilization wide, you have to get the 12 to 100. And then it's the 40 to 150 or the 300 from there. I don't think any of the other lenses have it. In fact, I'm not 100% sure about the 40 to 150. I assume it does, but I'm not 100%. It's another lens I don't own. I keep looking at and the 100 to 400 has image stabilization as well. I keep looking at that lens, and then the 150 to 400, the $8,000 lens, right? So actually, that's five, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. I think that's 5 lenses that have image stabilization, and they're all telephotos, which makes sense, right? A lot of the Panasonics have image stabilization built in because Panasonic, up until I think the G7, didn't put image stabilization in their cameras. Then shortly thereafter, they started to, and then subsequently, some of the lenses coming out didn't have image stabilization anymore. So the 40 to 150 does not have it. Apparently. Oh wait, yeah. So everybody's chiming in. Christine M says, I'm still of two minds. Those manual lenses, TT Artisans and the like, is it the price point mainly or fun of manuals? What is the deal beyond that? It's mainly the price point, right? The idea being, you want a wide angle lens, but you don't want to spend $800 for the Olympus version, and you don't want to spend $100 for the body cap lens, which is an f8. You can get an f2 or it's a 2.8, I forget what it is, wide angle for $140. And and that's I think it's mainly the price point, getting a focal length at that price point. Now, if you enjoy focusing manually, right? If you like that experience, I think that's really a secondary reason for these lenses. It may be your primary reason for getting it, but I think the lenses, they designed them in these focal lengths in manual focus to meet a certain price point, and still provide quality optics, ideally, right? We'll see. But that I think that's the main reason, because manually focusing, I'm not a big fan. I don't mind doing it. It does slow you down, and I take time to enjoy that part of it. But if I can get an autofocus version, I will. I don't intentionally buy a manual focus lens unless for some reason I need that focal length and it's too expensive to get the autofocus version, right? Which I did do a lot of, early on when I started photography. I bought a lot of vintage lenses. Obviously the Olympus 50 millimeter f1.8, but a lot of Nikon telephotos like the 135 f3.5, the 105 f2.5, the 105 f2.8, I think. I did buy a lot of vintage manual focus lenses, and because it was just an extremely cheap way to get a focal length that I wanted to try. Because at the time, to get a 200 millimeter f4, which I paid $99 for, it's a Nikon, vintage. You don't find a 200 millimeter f4 in autofocus, or anything close. Anything close to it would be a fortune, right? Relatively speaking. So I think it's mainly the price point. And if you enjoy autofocus, manual focus, all the better, right? And yeah, Steve, that, David Crooks really enjoys that lens. He takes it with him. He's taken it with him on every single photo walk for the last several months since he bought that lens, and he takes terrific images with it. I tried it out for a couple of images, and it's definitely sharper than the 75 to 300 when I compared them in just a single shot. I didn't really have time to compare a lot of pictures, but if you want a sharper lens at that focal length, the 100 to 400 is really good. But yeah, the speed is definitely a problem. He typically shoots at ISO 3200 all the time with that lens, unless it's, because most of the time he's going out in the morning where the sun hasn't fully come out yet, because that's when all the birds are around, usually all the interesting ones anyway. And he's shooting at ISO 3200 because you have to keep your shutter speed up for birds, particularly if they're birds in flight. And the only way to do that is to crank your ISO up. So yeah, it's definitely a concern. I'm on the fence too. I like that lens. I saw it on the refurb site for $11.99. But I'm thinking, my 75 to 300 is fine. It's not as sharp, but it's about the same speed in terms of aperture. So for the little bit that I do of birds, it's good enough for me for $400. I paid $400 for it. If I trade it, I could trade it for the 100 to 400, maybe get a couple $100 for the lens, and then I don't know. I know exactly how you feel though. It's still a little bit pricey for a genre of photography I'm not really heavy into. Oh, John Yutze has an interesting comment. Says how IS works with panning lens on Ali body depends on Ali body's particular combination. Hmm. I didn't think there was any situation where the two worked in sync. Separately, I think they work, but I don't think they work in sync. But I could be wrong. Definitely check that out. And System Mature is confirming the 40 to 150 does not have stabilization. That's surprising. I mean, that has the reach to kind of warrant having stabilization, but that's. And Errol says, saw your video on the laundromat shoot. I was impressed with the outcome. Oh, thank you, Errol. They came out okay. Yeah, the agent liked them a lot. They, but they, what are they? They always say awesome job, So at some point you're like, is it really awesome, or are they just, I don't know, you know? I wish I would have stayed longer to take more pictures, just for myself for artsy fartsy stuff, but I didn't. I just once I was done, I was ready to go. Oh, that's interesting. The GX9 is not as good as the M5 II. I wonder about the G9 versus the M5 II. Because Jane Pops is and I guess others love the stabilization on their Panasonics. I only have a what do I have? I have a GX85, and I don't expect that image stabilization to be any better. If anything, it'd be a little bit less than Olympus on any comparable camera. But that's just an assumption. Oh, Jeff Painter's here. Hey, Jeff. I'm looking at getting a lens. I'm looking at getting that lens as well with DxO Pure Raw similar. I don't think it's a problem to shoot high ISO. That's true. That's true to some extent. The problem is with birds, right? Let's just say one is sitting on a branch, and you can fill the frame, maybe half the frame with the bird, right? They're pretty close to you. When you're at high ISO, you're going to lose details that even this artificial AI is going to not quite get right, because a lot of birds, they have very, very fine feathers, very fine lines in them, and it's still going to lose some enough to just enough that if you took the same shot at a low ISO, you would see a big difference. But it does save a lot of pictures. I have one image here. I'll show you this one. I mean, I did an extreme. Here's an extreme example, right? EM5 Mark III with a 14 to 150 at 25,000 ISO. And then I corrected it using DxO Photolab, right? So it's a pretty substantial difference. Like, look at the wood here. The wood grain came out great. And the feathers, not bad. Not bad at all. So it cleaned it up really nicely, I think. And you can imagine, like at ISO, I over sharpened it a little bit, but you can imagine at lower ISOs that you can extrapolate how much better those images would be. So I think up to 6400 ISO, you can pretty much save any bird image and retain a lot of that fine detail that are in the feathers. But it's still going to lose some, obviously. But yeah, I would agree with that statement. It's not really a problem unless you're extremely critical and pixel peeping everything. But you got to understand, I filled the frame Well, I didn't fill the frame. The burr was probably about a quarter of the frame in this shot. I did crop in quite a bit. But it did a good job. And Barry's here. Good morning. And Marco had some feedback on the 100 to 400. Yeah, it is sharp. It is a sharp lens. I was pretty impressed. I mean, enough to the point that I'm thinking, maybe I get that instead of the 300 f4, because the 300 f4 will be sharper still and faster by at least a stop, right? Because it's an f4. But my question is, is it worth? Is it worth? Even if the two lenses cost the same, is it worth losing that versatility of a 100 to 400, right? First world problems, really. And dual IS, you are correct. Dual IS doesn't work on either the ollie or panning when you mix the bodies and lenses, but there are some quirks on settings for IS to work properly. Oh, okay. Okay, good to know. Yeah, and there's some combinations. That's so I guess if you already have some Olympus and Panasonic, mixing, I think whatever you had referred to earlier would be very helpful. And oh, hey Rick, how you doing? um, I think it'll come down to either Olympus 100 to 400 or the 40 to 140 Pro with the Olympus 40 to 150 Pro with a 2X. I'm not sure which of these lenses will have better IQ. Probably splitting hairs. You would be 300 millimeters at f 5.6. So you're getting roughly the same, because from 300 to 400, that little bit of difference, honestly, that difference is very small from 300 millimeters to 400 millimeters without using the teleconverter. The big difference is the 100 to 400, I think you can use the 2X teleconverter with it. So you're getting an 800 millimeter equivalent, right? Well, you're getting 800 millimeters. It would be a 1600 millimeter equivalent. So that's what's kind of enticing about the 100 to 400 is when you put a 2X teleconverter on it, yeah, you're at like F11 or something, but you're at 1600 millimeters, 35 millimeter equivalent. And that's the other thing. So it just drives me nuts thinking about all the different combinations to get a certain focal length when you have teleconverters involved. But 40 millimeters is wide enough that you can still do some pretty normal photography. So I feel like still the 40 to 150 would be a better choice because you'd be at 300 millimeter f5.6 with a 2X teleconverter. I think it'll still be a better choice. And it'll cost more though, but that putting a 2X teleconverter on a 100 to 400 is still kind of enticing. Solution is just buy it all, right? Money no object, just get it all. Why not? And Marco says the 300 millimeter f4 is double the price. The flexibility of the 100 was worth the trade-off. Yes, I agree. I love the images captured by the 300 millimeter, but damn, yeah, it's pricey. I agree. But I find them on eBay for about $2,000. So, man, when I say it out loud, I'm thinking, man, I can't spend that kind of money. And Druid says the MC20 is going to be worse off. The 100 to 400 would be better. Okay. I don't own any of these lenses, so I can't tell you firsthand. You'll have to do more due diligence. um, and I try to limit my max ISO to 3200 as I often need to do a lot of cropping, currently using Topaz for the denoise sharpening software. Yeah. Topaz has had a couple updates since I last tested it. I haven't tried it since these updates. But the initial tests I did, the DxO did a better job. And here's some more feedback. I found the TC2 does tend to lose sharpness if shooting with the 150 at 2x. The 100 400 would be my choice. Okay, good. So that's 2 to 2. That's 2 to 1 now, because I said get the 40 to 150 with a 2x teleconverter. 2 to 1 says to get the 100 to 400. And like I said, I thought the 100 to 400 was pretty sharp. And System Mature says I have a 300 for sale if anyone's interested. Okay. So if anyone wants that lens, I'm not ready to buy it now. It's just, you know, even at $1,000, I would have a hard time. And oh, Jerky's here. Panasonic lens, what I have is a 25 f1.7. I can't see any difference if I use Ollie lens, or maybe it just works good enough for me. Yeah, I mean, for photos, I didn't see any difference, honestly. Someone else asked me about this the other day or last week in an email, and I said, yeah, for 100, I paid 200 for mine brand new, but you can get them for less than that, used, right? 150 or less, maybe even new for 100. I don't know what prices are on that lens now, but it's about half the price of the Olympus version, right? So yeah, it's more of a plasticky build, but image quality, I didn't see any difference really. I didn't do any hardcore day in, day out testing of it, but just a few times I went out with either lens, they both produce great images and very sharp. And Rick says Olympus still holds the crown for the world's best, in-body stabilization. And when used the Pro Series 304, they also added high lens in-lens image. Yes. So yeah, that's the dual lens syncing of the two stabilization. So that's the other thing is the image stabilization built into the 300 millimeter is better than the image stabilization built into the 100 to 400. I mean, obviously, because you're paying a lot more. Oh, Marco, I think wants that lens. Cool. All right. So let me talk about what I did new for the first time. Not well, it is actually the first time I've ever done corporate headshots or or portraits. Yeah, corporate portrait, or what do they call them? Executive headshots and things. And I practiced a little bit the night before, prepared as ever, right? I'm always practicing portraits on and off, although I don't talk about it much. I do practice portraits on and off, but the day before the shoot, I did a lot of practicing. And well, 2 days before, actually, I did practice 2 nights, and I took maybe 40 or 50 shots uh, each day with different lighting. And the problem I had was really mainly with the reflector, right? So let me see if I can pull up my setup here. Because I took a picture of the setup, kind of. While this is coming up, I watched a lot of corporate headshot type videos on YouTube from everybody, right? And a lot of them were about speed and efficiency. Like, if you have 70 or 80 or more people that you need to get a headshot of, and you need to do it in the same day, there was a lot of good tips there on setting things up so you can do things quickly. But I only had to take a picture of two people, and I spent about 45 minutes shooting these two guys on a gray backdrop. Let's see if it comes up. No, that's not it. Yeah, this is it. Okay, let me go cam left. All right, so here is let me just catch up on the text. There's a question here. Did you use different setups when shooting female portrait versus male portraits? No, I didn't have any females. It was just a couple of guys. So here's the basic setup, right? I had my Godox TT350, which this didn't work out too well. Shining a light on this gray. This is just a gray cloth backdrop. It's like $100. It comes with the stand. And over here on the left side, it's hard to see, but right here on the left side, there's a 36-inch white reflector, right, hanging off a light stand. And then behind the camera, or right by this chair, is my Godox V1. I still have everything in the bag. So I had this round head thing on a stand with a single 36-inch umbrella, so fairly small umbrella. And I had it set up pretty high, and I had to move all this furniture out of the way eventually to make room for the light stand and the umbrella. So I was in a pretty small space. So my idea was I have the umbrella over here on the right. Where's my mouse? So I have the umbrella over here on the right. I have the reflector on the left. And I have this as a backlight. what I should have done, and this is just a little selfie stick that I used to mount this. You'll notice a book here on the floor because one guy was about 5 inches shorter than the other. So I had him stand on this book when they were doing side-by-side shots. So that's the basic setup. Very simple. I carried everything in 2 bags, right? I had my simple bag that you guys always see me with, my little messenger bag. My Swiss Army bag, right? This I had my camera. I brought 3 flashes. I brought my 8200. I ended up not using it because it was such a tight space. I didn't need powerful lights. And then in the other bag I had the light stand I had the 2 light stands plus the backdrop stand and the backdrop itself in another bag about this size, but I just carried those 2 things in. So it's a very, very easy setup with the EM1 Mark III and the 12-40 Pro. So that is the basic setup. And then let me show you the shots that I got. Let's look at one straight out of camera. So here's a straight out of camera shot. So you can see the glow of the Godox TT350 behind him, and the cloth backdrop. It picked up a lot of the wrinkles, which I didn't like. And then you can see the umbrella here shining the light to the left, and then this side is from the reflector, right, bouncing the light off the main key light. So I made a couple of mistakes. One is I didn't. I brought my Spider Cube white balance tool, and I forgot to use it. I used it on the laundromat shoot, but I totally forgot to use it here. I brought it with me specifically because white balance is an issue, right? Fortunately, he had a pretty white handkerchief sleeve or whatever down here that I was able to use as the white balance, because shirts, can always be a little bit off white. So I just went here and clicked on it, and there, that corrected the white balance. I could click on the gray back here. It's pretty much the same, as you can see. So that's the other thing about using a gray background, is you could probably use that for the white balance tool. But the problem is when it's behind the person, a lot of the color casting from the person was going to bleed off onto that gray background. So it's not as reliable as using an actual gray card or color white balance tool. But all of this was pretty white, so that's what I used. But there was definitely consistency problems from one shot to the next in terms of white balance. So some of the shots are a little bit warmer than the others. It's very subtle. Only photographers would probably notice because the client loved the shots. So that's the basic straight out of camera. Now, let's see, where is the processed one? Here's one that's been processed, right? So I just used Photoshop to change the background, because they'd asked me, if you could do the shots, try several different backgrounds. So I did, and that's one of them. This one I didn't like too much, but it's a brick background. And I did some other things on the processing. And then, of course, you have to do the traditional white background, right? If they want to use it on a website. And here's one with sort of a gray or slate chalkboard type background with some vignetting. They're not all showing here. And then there's the environmental shot. Let me pull up my that's what I cooked for lunch yesterday and the day before. Here's the portraits. So you can see, right? Same shot, but I changed the background from a slate to the stone color to the wood paneling. And let's see, down here towards the bottom, here's the gray, right? Just standard gray with a little bit of vignette. Let's see. The other thing I had to do, right, is I had to get rid of the shine on the face. Because if you look at this image versus, where's the original? This is the original. See the shine here? A little shine here and shine here, a shine on the nose, a little bit over the eyebrow. If you look at the photoshopped image, you can see I corrected, all of that shine, or I minimized it, right? You don't want to eliminate it completely, but I minimized it. Okay, let me check the questions here. I did shoot at f5.6, I believe. What was the question? Considering the wrinkles in the background, did you consider opening up? Oh, it wouldn't have been enough. I could have shot at f2.8 and it wouldn't have been enough. So what I would have had to done is have the people come a lot closer to me so that the background was further back, and then shoot. So I can try that next time, but it the wrinkles would still show. Even if they were a little bit softer, they would still show. And DeMorgan says, how many shots did you take? I took a lot. I mean, a lot of them were test shots. Let me take a look. Oh, where is it? So basically, I ended up using about 4 or 5 shots out of the whole session. But total, let me reset this. And let's just do the raws. So I took 160. A lot of these were test shots, right? I was just testing the lighting and stuff. So I would say from here to about here, these 20 images, well, up to here, this one and this one. So it took me about 14 shots to get the lighting the way I wanted. And then I started doing more. But these were fast, right? It was like I was taking them, every couple of seconds. Click, click, click. So I took 160 altogether. Let me go down, including the environmentals and then the pairing. And some of these were just, I was just seeing how the light looked by itself. But yeah, my very first corporate portrait, here's a couple of mistakes, like the light stand was right in the middle here. I mean, I cropped up here above the lighting, but it created a little bit of, let me show you what happened. It created all these shadows or highlights on their suit, which even if when I crop up here, you can still see the light shining up against the suit. So what I should have done with this Godox light, instead of shining it on the background, since I'm just replacing the backgrounds anyway, is I should have put it on a 6 or 7 foot light stand and have it pop on the ceiling to kind of come back down and create some rim lighting on the hair and on their shoulders, rather than putting the light behind them. And then What's Rick has some advice here. Something that many people forget when shooting studio portraits that what will be reflected in the person's eyes. So you need to be careful of what's behind the camera. It may reflect. Yes. That was the other thing, is because the one person was shorter than the other, I should have lowered the umbrella because they didn't get, and I'll show you what I mean. They didn't get as good a catch light in the eyes. Let's see, like this guy's pretty tall, right? And there's nice catch light here in the eyes, here and here. But then the other guy, there's almost no catch light. So I had to paint in a little bit of catch light into the eyes because I had the umbrella too high. So I should have lowered the umbrella so I got more catch light. And that was kind of the common problem throughout the thing. But yeah, that was my setup. Very simple. So ultimately, it was more like a one light. It was like a one light setup with an umbrella, and I think the results came out pretty good. I mean, they were ecstatic. They loved the photos, right? But as a photographer, you can see these very subtle differences in white balance, in catch light, in rim lighting. All of these little things, and like what Rick was saying, the reflection in their eyes, what's reflecting, you have to be kind of conscious of. There's a lot of these kind of little things that generally only photographers notice, but you have to be conscious of these things, right? Did I enjoy it? Yeah, it was a lot of fun. It's mainly because those two guys are a riot. Those two guys are really funny. They were they made me laugh more than I made them laugh. Let me tell you. So it was a good time, and I think the first one is always a little bit. You always find all the problems all the mistakes you made, but the second, third time, I guarantee it will be much better. So hopefully I'll get some more work out of this for doing corporate type portraits. I'm going to try and set up a presentation because this brokerage, right? They have these meetings once a month. I think it's every third Wednesday or something. They have these meetings once a month where they all get together and try and sell each other the properties that they have, right? So about 20 or 30 brokers get together and then do presentations of the properties that they're trying to sell and say, hey, look, I got this laundromat. I got to tell you, I can't talk about it. I'm sorry. I got some of the specs on the laundromat, what they spent to build that thing out and stuff. I can't talk about it, unfortunately. It's like a non-disclosure thing, right? But I was it looks as expensive as it is, I don't know how to word it. It wasn't cheap to build that thing out. That's all I can tell you. So they went full first class premium equipment everywhere. I mean, like one washing machine was like $5,000. It's just shocking. So I can tell you what one washing machine cost. Because that's generally publicly available. But man, let me tell you that was an expensive build out. So any questions on that photo shoot, I can share with you. Gigafish says the V1 for shorter and 8200 for taller. No, you can use either light either way. Long as it produces enough light, right? If I had bigger modifiers, like a one of those tall grid boxes, and stuff like that, I would definitely use the 8200 because you need more power to evenly illuminate the light modifier. We'll just call it that, and you'll get a much better quality light. I have an 8400 as well that would probably be better because I can mount the modifier, I think, directly onto the flash. I've never used it, but if I get more portrait work, I'll buy some light modifiers. But for now, I'm just using my light stands and umbrellas that I have that I paid like $50 for the whole kit, right? You get 2 light stands, 2 umbrellas, um, and I paid $100 for the gray backdrop. But I doubled my money basically on that job, and I don't want to say out loud what I charge for that. I will on other photo shoots, but not this one. It's a little because this one's a little bit different. I can't go into all the details. But generally speaking, I would think you would charge like $150 a head if it's a single shot. If you're only doing a couple of guys, right? If you're doing multiple, like if you're doing 40 or 50 shots, like I might have a job like that coming. You might charge different. I have to research that because I've never done it before. They all got their. You're funny, Rick. Let's see. Photoshop in a couple of lampshades and cans of Budweiser and call it a great. Yeah, exactly. And Christine says, wait, Andrew, sorry. Did your clients put out expectations, poses, styles beforehand that they wished for you to do? Did you agree on such things before? Yes. They basically wanted headshots, like chest up, and that was it, and some different backgrounds. So I showed them a few different backgrounds that I had that I could, Photoshop in. Once I got there, but they asked me over the phone, we want to do some corporate headshots, basically chest up. And I said, gray background's good enough. And they said, well, do you have some other backgrounds? I said, sure. So when I went there, I showed them a couple other backgrounds that I had that I could superimpose in Photoshop. And that was it. I did some taller shots. The only thing they changed was, they said, they wanted the formal shots with a tie, but they wanted a couple of shots without a tie. That's the only thing that was kind of new when I got there. And I said, yeah, that's fine, So they took their tie off. And then while I was there, I suggested, why don't we get a couple of environmental shots while we're at it? So I took a couple of shots of them at the conference table. So those were the two main differences, but I've known these guys for many years, so it was a very casual type. It was a very casual interaction, both in setting up the job for the photo shoot and then while I was there. Had I not known these people, these guys really well, I've known them for probably 7 or 8 years at least. And they finally decided to update their because their headshots that they have now were like more than 10 years old. But if I didn't know them, I would be much more formal. I would have a contract. I would have much more specifics about what kind of shots we're going to do, and how much I'm going to charge and how many shots they're going to get, right? Because typically a headshot, you give them 1 or 2. That's it. But I was a lot more flexible with these guys in this case. Yeah, just a quick one on this lens. I'd love to see it come out, but it's not going to be cheap. $1,000. I mean, maybe it'll be close pricer to the 12 to 45 f4, like at 600. That would be nice. At 600, I think it'll sell, and it'll be sharper than the 40 to 150 that sells for less than 200 now. And the photographer is more critical of their own work. Most people don't even see the mistakes or anomalies. Yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely. Because I shared the photos with my buddy Walter, who's also, professional portrait photographer. And he pointed out a lot of things for me to do next time as well. Yeah, Matt does a good job. Yeah, he's I didn't see any from him about corporate headshots because whenever you see portraits come up for him, it's always of these women, and I wasn't shooting any women. Uh, the advice that I got though about shooting women, or that I saw when I was watching one of the videos, was women tend to like the Rembrandt type look. Uh, what I can't remember. You shoot a little bit higher. I don't know. There was one photographer of all the videos I watched that suggested a little bit different angle of light and pose for women, for particularly for corporate. Uh, but I can't remember what it was now. And I don't know if it's really necessary. I thought, because when you have to do a multiple shots and you for time, right? Um, what Sean Tucker did is he had two lines on the floor, and for men he would tell them to stand on this line, and then for women he would have them stand on the other line because the light was different on one line or the next. So it was a little bit stronger, uh, I think, on the men and a little bit softer on the women. I forget which direction, but he, for purposes of speed and efficiency, he taped lines on the floor that were about a foot apart. And he'd ask women to stand on this line and men to stand on that line because the shape of the light was different depending where they were standing. And he got a more flattering look, for each type of photograph, male or female. So I'd have to watch it again. Like, I'm not an experienced portrait photographer, right? So I'm just watching 1,000 videos like you guys if you're interested in doing portrait photography. I just wanted to share with you my experience and the kind of the results I got. And I thought they were pretty good. I mean, the client was happy, but as photographers, we can always do better, right? We can always improve. Joe Edelman's one of the best portrait photographers, particularly glamour type photography. And Sean Tucker did a really good video. Although it's a bit dated, the principles are the same, right? He was like using a Canon 5D Mark I, or I mean, like, it's a dated video in terms of gear, but the gear doesn't matter, right? It's about the lighting setup, the tips he had for doing things efficiently when you're doing multiple, like, all day shoots, and slight differences between men and women when shooting, men versus women doing corporate headshots. And he did it very simply by just putting a line on the floor and telling where the men and the women to stand. So I thought that was pretty brilliant. Fortunately, I didn't have to worry about that, but that was one of the better videos. Was a very old Sean Tucker portrait corporate headshot video. It was one of the better ones I saw. And I cannot answer this question. In my opinion, if you have a Panasonic camera, get a Panasonic lens. With Olympus, the 75 to 300 sells for $400, and I think it's a great lens for the money. I don't know. Oh, this is the 14 to 140. I'm sorry that I don't know. I would think 300 would be a better deal because the Olympus version is about 300 bucks used, brand new. It's like 500. So it's comparable. I would just say just get the Olympus for Olympus and Panasonic for Panasonic. I don't know if there's any significant image quality differences. Butterfly lighting, yes. I thought about doing that. I have to practice though. The theory is very simple. You put one light down low with the umbrella and you put another light up high. That way you kind of kill a lot of the shadows under the nose and under the chin to get a very nice even lighting on the face, right? Uh, but I didn't practice that. I only practiced with one light. And most of the corporate headshot videos I saw were with really two lights. One was kind of behind, creating the rim lighting and some of the lighting here, and then the key light with a reflector. That's all I saw on all the corporate videos. I didn't see any corporate videos where they used the butterfly setup. Uh, I did see a lot of portrait videos where they used a butterfly setup, and I think, but I didn't see a lot for corporate, so I didn't waste time. I was, I didn't prepare. I was short on time. I only prepped a couple of days practice. um, but I do want to practice the butterfly uh, technique because I think it was used on the James Bond portrait I saw on Instagram that Walter shared with me. Let me see if I can find that. That was pretty amazing. Let me pull up my email. He emailed me. Daniel Craig. Yeah, this one. This is pretty dramatic, right? Of Craig Roberts. Let me close this down so you guys can see. I'm going to go cam right. All right, so this is pretty good. And then the other one, this one, let's look at this one, right? This one I'm pretty sure was some sort of butterfly lighting or reflector because there's no shadow under his nose and it's very minimal here under the chin. I don't know. I mean, I only see one light in his eyes and the reflection. So I'm just and based on the light on his skin, there's a key light off to his left side coming in here. Oh, could have brushed that a little bit, but there's a key light coming here, but it's almost straight on. It's not, 45 degrees off from him. It's almost right. It's just a little bit off center, it looks like. And then there's lighting underneath for his eyes and, like right in here, there's lighting here and here coming from somewhere. Most likely it's a reflector, but it might be butterfly lighting, right? Where they have a flash on low power underneath with an umbrella. So and I love the colors here. It's very nostalgic kind of color, film lookish, right? Or cinematic. I love this. I'm gonna try and do this myself in some of my practice shots. I definitely want to try this. And then let's see. This one, yeah, this one, the light is definitely head on. You can see the reflection right here. But man, this lighting is really amazing. I just don't know how this light under the nose but there's light inside here. It just feels more like a reflector. Although the shadows are still pretty dark under here. It's a really interesting shot for me to try to emulate. So I'm gonna try and do this. Oops, wrong window. I'm gonna try and do this on myself. Do a couple of test shots, and also try to match that color. I really like that color. I look best with the lamps off. Yeah, reflector down low. I have no idea. Let's see. And Rick says, I've always preferred to use reflectors and to shoot outdoors for portrait shots, generally speaking, with a good background. My clients prefer the overpost studio shots. Yeah, I think we're going to do some more on-site type shots, maybe with the properties behind them. And those are like environmental shots, though, not like what you're talking about. Um, that's something to think about. Find someplace kind of more scenic instead of using artificial backdrops, right? And let's see, John is here. It says, hello from Florida, back to shooting now that weather is very good. From June to September was set a 50-year record for rain. Really? Wow. Wow, that's a lot of rain. Um, and here's a question. If you have brand-specific Godox remote trigger, will high-speed sync work with any of their brand-specific flashes? I have the TT350O. Will HSS work with a trigger from... Yes. So what you're saying is if you have a Godox radio trigger that's made for Sony, will that trigger the oh, that's, well, okay, let me tell you. Okay, yes it does and no it doesn't. There's two answers really. The first answer is if you're using a Godox Sony trigger, right, a Godox trigger made for Sony cameras on an Olympus body, you're not going to be able to do TTL or high-speed sync or anything like that. You should be able to fire the flashes manually and control the flashes manually through the trigger, and then the Sony camera will just send the fire signal to the trigger that will fire the flashes, and the flashes will fire based on the settings you have set up in the trigger. If you're using a Godox Sony radio trigger on a Sony body, okay, then yes, you will have high-speed sync, TTL, everything, regardless of the brand-specific flashes. So this is an Olympus Panasonic specific pinout here, right? So this will work on the body directly with the camera, but off camera, it doesn't care what radio trigger is being used. But the radio trigger cares what camera it's on, right? It may or may not work. The Sony radio trigger may not work on an Olympus camera, but if it does, it's only going to work in manual mode, right? Through the radio trigger. And I can tell you that for a fact because my buddy who uses a Nikon Godox radio trigger was able to fire my Olympus brand specific flashes, high-speed sync, all of that, no problems. So it's really, so two answers, right? So if you're using a Sony Godox trigger with a Sony camera, the flash, it doesn't matter what brand it's made for. It'll work, right? But if you're using a Sony radio trigger on an Olympus body, it's probably not going to work. Reflectors outdoors in California work well, and you can roast. Yes. I wouldn't even need to use flash really outdoors if I just used reflectors right. But I'd have to practice. I mean, you can watch all the videos you want online, and know everything conceptually, but until you practice and see what your camera and lighting and reflectors and everything works, uh, so I don't know. I'd have to practice a lot. You always have to practice with your own gear, your own reflectors, and all of that. Fortunately, I got up to speed pretty quickly. Like I said, I only spent a couple of days practicing, not even that long. Like I said, I took 40 or 50 shots each day until I got the lighting right. And then when I went on site, I just had to adapt to the space that I was in, and that was it. And by adapting to the space, meaning, how am I going to put a light stand here when the room is so small? Fortunately, my house is small, so I was able to manage, but I had to take furniture out of the room so I could put the light stand where I needed it. And carry on with the building your portrait techniques. It's exciting to explore new challenges. Yes, definitely. Uh, so hopefully I'll get some more work. So I'll be able to go to one of these meetings that the brokers held. I don't know if I ever finished that thought, but do a presentation of, the kind of photography that I do for commercial real estate, because it's a commercial real estate meeting, and also headshots and things, right, that I did for these clients. Now that I have something that I can put in my portfolio other than myself, right? So as I build that up, hopefully that'll build up and do well. I had some other interesting conversations about doing some other kind of work. Um, so we'll see. Obviously, there's on-site environmental shots and video that we need to do. I've only done a couple of those, but those are very simple. Uh, but we'll see. We'll see. It should pan out. I hope. I need to get on it though. I need to do a little bit more research on some of the other things I need to do. Oh, okay, Magnus. I'm glad that answered your question. Um, what's what's my ID number? I want to fire your Olympus. By ID number, if you mean channel and group, um, I'm usually on channel 2 and then group A, B, C, depending how many flashes I have. The biggest difficulty with female corporate portraits is the need to combine a corporate portrait with a glamour shot, which are opposites. I've tended to go for the softer lighting and soft focus. Yes. Um, like I said, Sean Tucker did a good job. When you're doing volume, if you're doing single shots, like if you're just going out to do one person and a corporate headshot, uh, I would definitely have to look into more about how to pose, not pose, but how to take portraits of women differently than you would for men. If I was doing a single person, for the high volume type things where you're doing 70, 80 people, I thought what Sean Tucker did was brilliant. Rob, any thoughts on kit lenses today versus kit lenses from 20 years ago? Seems to me that they are optically better. Yeah, definitely the I think, computer design, they have software now to help you design lenses, obviously. And that process has improved the optics of the lenses substantially. Because, and a lot has to do, I think, with the automation process of building kit lenses, right? And all of the plastics and stuff that we have now, for the lens construction, because back then they used plastic lenses too, but I think a lot of the lens design nowadays is all done by computer, and the manufacturing process has matured quite a bit for modern lenses, and I find the kit lenses to be very good. They just have to limit the more higher end processes that they do on pro glass. I mean, there's a lot more polishing, a lot more coatings, there's a lot more refinement in the motors and optics for doing all these corrections. I mean, pro lenses are designed to a much higher level. But yeah, the kit lenses from back in the day, like I used to have a lot of vintage. They might still be in the basement, but the kit lenses from back in the day, when I adapted them to my, at the time I was adapting them to my Sony camera. You could definitely see a difference in the image quality. They were not as good as the kit lens that came with the Sony camera. I bought a lot of kit lenses just for fun, because they were cheap and they were fun, but yeah, they were awful. They were particularly the zooms. Zoom lens design in particular, primes pretty much have been good for a long time, right? But zoom lenses have never been good. Zoom lenses, I'd say from the 70s and back, just sucked. And that's why they're so cheap on eBay. If you see a zoom lens on eBay, they are dirt cheap, with a few exceptions. If they're expensive, it's most likely because it was good. But most of them are very cheap. There are the outliers out there that are very good zoom lenses from back in the day, but generally speaking, that's not the case. So I don't buy zoom lenses, vintage zoom lenses, and a lot of the kit lenses were zoom lenses, right, from back in the day. The current modern design zoom lenses are very good, including the kit lenses. They're much better than the older stuff. 20 years ago would have been what? Only Y2K, 2001. I would still buy, I'm thinking 40, 50 years. 20 years, I don't know. I'm thinking a lot of the kit lenses that came 20 years ago were like the 50 millimeter f1.8, because there wasn't a micro four thirds camera back then that I can remember. But no question, lens designs have definitely improved. Yeah, the kit zooms nowadays, like I said, the zooms nowadays are really good. But there's a lot of sharpening, and you don't know what's going on Flickr, right? But I've gotten great shots with my kit lenses. Yeah, the Vivitar regular class, the Vivitar Series 1 were very good lenses, right? And the Casino Factory or Casino brand. They weren't branded Casino, but they were manufactured by the Casino plant. Those were very good. And HCam, how are you? I'm using the 12 to 40 2.8 as my always on objective. I feel it's mostly too short. Thinking about a 12 to 100 f4. I haven't heard anything bad about that lens, the 12 to 100. So if you trade your 12 to 40 in and get the 12 to 100, that would make sense. I wouldn't have both at the same time, because I would probably never use the 12 to 40 if I had the 12 to 100. The reason I don't have the 12 to 100 is because I just think it's a little bit too bulky for micro four thirds, or for me, I should say. But others, that's the only lens they need, right, for majority of their photography. So they don't have to change lenses in the field. They can just put that 12 to 100 and they're good to go and ready for anything. So yeah, I don't think that would be a bad move to to switch to a 12 to 100. But then if you can, sell off your 12 to 40 because you probably never use it at that point because there's overlap in focal length. Yeah, you lose a stop, but that's not that big a deal, right? For most of us. Most of us, we're going to use a prime if we want that shallow depth of field or that faster aperture, right? Like an f1.8. So I would go 12 to 100. And I think the 12 to 100 also has the dual sync IS, which Steve Kunder's kind of alluding to here. Yeah, these are great lenses. The 45 is awesome. The 25 Panny and the 50 millimeter f. The nifty 50s, right, are always good lenses. It's hard to mess those up, I would think. Yeah, and Andrew's just repeating the same thing that I've heard or seen, or I've had the 12 to 100 on my camera when I was at the camera store, and I said, no, I'm not doing it. Because usually when I go out, the 14 to 150 kit lens is good enough for me. Um, oh, okay, so you're all set. If you have the 17 and the 45, you might as well get the 12 to 100, and then you can pocket those other two lenses when you need a faster aperture, and then get rid of the 12 to 40. And Ruth, how are you? Says, I just acquired an Olympus 12 to 45 f4. When taking group shots at wide end, the people on the edges seem to be leaning into the frame. Is that normal? How would you correct? Yeah, you need to get further back if you can. Wide angle lens distortion is unavoidable. Uh, so, there is some DxO Photolab 4 Elite is able to correct some of that if it's too late. Like, this is the shot you got. How do you correct it? You need to you would need that software, but even then, it just still looks a little bit off or unnatural. It's better than it was, but it's still off. The only real solution is you have to move back and shoot shoot a little bit tighter. When you're shooting wide angle with people and the people are at the edges, they're going to be distorted. Now, if you say they look like they're leaning in a little bit, that's a keystoning type error, right? So that would tell me that you didn't have the focal plane, meaning the sensor, completely parallel on both axes with the subject. So if this is your sensor, right? You may have been shooting down or up a little bit, just slanted slightly. So when you're taking a picture, use your level meters when you're taking wide angle shots in particular, because it gets really distorted if you're not completely parallel on the plane of focus, right? Or the plane of the sensor has to be, the two have to be completely, because as if this is your subject, as you start to tilt your camera one way or the other, especially with wide angle, that distortion gets worse. So definitely use your level meters in your camera to try and make sure you're as level as possible, both vertically and horizontally, when you're doing wide angle shots. And that'll eliminate sort of the leaning type issue or keystoning problems. But the wide angle distortion where people on the end look kind of stretched out, yeah, there's nothing you can do about that. You could maybe do it with DxO, which has sort of that correction built in. And it's an add-on. It's not built in the DxO. You have to buy like the whole premium package. But that solution is minimal at best. The only solution really is to do it in the field, back up and shoot a little bit tighter so you don't get that distortion. Yeah, Lauren's saying shoot 14 millimeters. Still goes back to what I was saying. Shoot a little bit tighter, meaning a little bit not quite as wide. That'll help. But to do that, you have to back up, right? You have to back up and make sure it's completely level. Okay, looks like I'm all caught up. So anyhow, I didn't get a chance to bring anyone in together with me. I wanted to maybe bring some of the viewers in again, like I did last week, but I'm a little bit short on time. Uh, but I really appreciate you guys being here today, and it was a lot of fun. I always have fun sharing with you my photo projects, especially when they're brand new, like doing portraits this week. If I do anything else new, I'll be always sure to share what I do and how I do, good or bad, right? Um, so next week, look forward to my lens review of the 7.5 millimeter. That should be coming. I'll probably have a couple of microphone reviews as well, but we'll see. I'm still working out which ones to review. And I know those aren't as big with you guys as others, but the lens review will be fun, and I'll be able to compare it with my 8mm fisheye. Uh, oh, there's one more question here. What focal length is wide angle when considering distortion? Um, really, it's not about the focal length as much as it is distance, right? Because you could use a 12mm, which is a wide angle, right, on a landscape, and you won't get distortion because the landscape is so far away, or should, ideally would be far away, and you won't get that wide angle distortion. The distortion is caused by when you get really close, and then the camera has to, like, the I'm not really a physics guy. I can't explain it properly. But when you're talking about taking pictures of subjects maybe 3 meters or less, generally speaking, 12 millimeters is too wide, right? The people on the edges are going to look distorted. And I would say comfortably groups of 6 or 8 people where they're going to be spread out over about 3 meters. You want to be standing back at least 3 meters back. So it's more about your distance from the subject versus your focal length more than it is the focal length itself, right? So I would say, always get as far back as you can when you're shooting groups of people with a wide angle lens. Wide angle meaning in micro four thirds terms, 12 millimeters, 14 millimeters. You want to get back. I found between 17 millimeters and 25 millimeters, you're forced to stand back pretty far if you're trying to catch a group of people like if it's 6 or 9 people standing, where they're standing about 3 meters from edge to edge, 17 millimeter, 25 millimeter, you don't get too much distortion because you're forced to stand further back. Now, if you only have a 12 millimeter lens and you're taking a group picture, you need to stand further back and then crop in post. Then you won't get any distortion. It's kind of the same thing, right? Is stand further back so that distortion is more of a function of the distance you are. So if you stand further back, even with a wide angle lens, if you crop in, that distortion is not going to exist, right? Because the distortion is all on the sides of the image, not in the center. So to answer your question a little more directly, 17 to 25 millimeters, a good focal length for groups of people without getting that distortion. But the science behind it is you have to stand further back to get them all in. So I hope that answers. Yeah, keystoning is definitely a problem. Yeah, Lauren says anything under 17, basically, he's a little bit leery of. And even 17, if you get close and somebody's standing on the side, you're going to get distortion. So, yeah, you just need to get some distance, basically, and crop in if you need to. But okay, I really have to go. So, thanks everyone for joining me this week. I'll be back again next week. It was great seeing everyone again. And have a good weekend if I don't talk to you guys before then. Where's my I never get Oh, it's right here. Got it. Okay. Now I'm gone. Oh wait, no, it's one more